Isha ki Tazreea, Mugga dike Maimah that came out Tavshin Memtes. I think they all did then, right? This was the Hemshech then. For sure. Gewalt. Isha ki Tazreea v'yolda zochar. So if a woman gives seed and gives birth to a male, so she's tummy for 7 days, and the whole Hemshech, and the female 14, and so on. V'yomer Razal. Why doesn't the pasuk just say Isha ki yolda v'yolda zochar? A woman who gives birth to a male. Rather, no. Isha ki yolda zochar. What is ki Tazreea? She gives seed. What does this mean? So Omer Hazara, she brings it. Isha mazras tchila. I don't know what this means scientifically. I'm sure it's a simple explanation. A woman who seeds first, you let the zochar, the result will be a male. Ish mazriya tchila. If he seeds the husband, then you let this in the keva, then a female, a girl. Which means, by the way, that therefore the girl, in a way, is a deeper connection to the father than a boy, because of this, the whole story with the Tzemach Tzedek, right? The dream. More than Yom Yom. Okay, or maybe Admo Razokin. Whatever brings in the quantitative Maschazeh in the mind which begins with these words as follows. The philosophy in Pirshu, the philosophers, explain this phenomenon as follows. What's the reason that if she seeds first, the result is a male? Answer, they say, so she expresses the seed first, then his comes later. And therefore Govar, the one that comes on top, dominates. So she seeds first, and then on top of this comes the male. So in halacha, you have one thing on top of the other. The top one has a greater influence on the bottom in many halachas and kashrus than the bottom in terms of seepage and influence than the bottom on the top. Right? Clear? Yeah. What they say. The explanation is very forced. It's very literally, it's a forced explanation. What does he say? And he explains. First of all, he says, so they're saying, the philosophers, it's a boy because of the father. But she sets it up by seeding first and allowing him to be the dominant one, the upper one. So therefore, a boy is a result, but the explanation is associating the male with the male. But that's not the pashtus in the pasuk, says the Alter Rebbe. The simple meaning of the pasuk is that it's her seeding, that's what causes the male, not the female, not the male's role. That a male being born is really as a result of the woman's seed primarily. Not because she is first and he comes afterwards and therefore his role dominates. So therefore he rejects, it's a doichek because it doesn't fit in with the pasuk, which associates the male with the Isha, period. Now the question is, why is he bringing an explanation from the philosophers, from the secular world? This that he brings, this first explanation, the conclusion, which is that a male born is a result of the male of the father, as they said, which comes later, Kila, Gova, the upper one that comes afterwards on top, dominates. So this he brings this pirush. Say the mizon moreover shemaktim pirush ela pirush l'sasacha mizera Isha, and makes it. It's his first explanation before he's going to explain that no, the male is born as a result of the feminine. Why would he do that? Ki ish ve'isha, in other words, because he wants to grant legitimacy to their pirush even bepnimius, which he's now going to explain, and we'll learn how order 4 at the end of the ois. Who ki ish ve'isha baruchnius, because male and female spiritually, hey Makodesh Baruch the Knesset Yisrael refer to Hashem and Knesset Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, that's masculine, and Knesset Yisrael, which means literally the collection of neshamas, that's Malchus, Atzilus, that's feminine. The repository of neshamas Yisrael. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the B'Shem Ish, the Abish is called the male, the husband, Knesset Yisrael B'Shem Isha, and Eden are called the wife. V'yadua, and it's known, it's known with respect to the relationship with God, whether it happens as a result of an arousal from above or an arousal from below. Each one is a mile, as a virtue. When the connection to Hashem starts with us, our awakening, our reaching out to the Eibishter. So if that's the whole framework of the relationship, so the Maila is the relationship that happens. Is much more internal. You're not blown away by God's revelation. You've reached out to Him. You've opened up. So if you open up, it enters b'pnimius. You've given something. If you give something, then it becomes part of you much more, rather than just be the blessed recipient. That's the mile of water. When the avoid is misademata, it enters in the pnimius because you made space for God. You've opened, you've reached out. So the fire, as opposed to water, the fire is produced by the consumption of the fuel. To connect to Hashem, you've got to give up a little bit of a taiva at least. Or a little bit of a taiva, or a little taiva, or a big one. So what's the ma'ale besrusa de le'ela? Mitzad atzmo, what's its virtue? On the one hand, it's coming to you, and therefore it's not so bepnimius. On the other hand, it's uncompromised. It comes from a very lofty place. When God gives, He gives. And He gives from a place where we could never reach. That's its ma'ale. But then he adds, but what is He giving to us? It's a chitzoniistic expression, because it's not a pneumatic relationship. David, I thought you're going to get up to close the door if you could, yeah. The Amshachas mechitzoni is the level from above. It's a wonderful embrace, and very lofty one. But it's an embrace, not the pneumius. Why? Because God's not forcing His way into us. And we don't touch His pneumius if we haven't opened up. It's like a blind love. I love you unconditionally. It's a wonderful thing. But that it completely ignores who you are. Doesn't matter your state. I love you. So it's makif. It means it doesn't matter what. And it's not your avodah. It doesn't precipitate. It's unconditional love. But if it's only unconditional love, then you're not engaging. You're not engaging. It's unconditional love. There's going to be ups and downs in your relationship, because although at the core it's like unconditional, but there's the everyday stuff that you're connecting. If I'm never hurt by you, it's unconditional, then you haven't really touched me. So on the one hand, it's very deep. It's a place that you cannot touch in the sense of you cannot compromise it or commit it forever. But if that's all it is, then on my conscious level, you're not there. And Hashem wants us, it wants a pneumistic relationship. So that's the chsodon of the second oifen, where it is milamayla lamata. We're clear? Yeah? Now continuing. So having said what we just did about the mile of these two relationships, pnimius on the one hand, loftier on the other, this is the origin of the two pirushim, the philosophers and the Alter Rebbe, which is why he brings in Chassidus. Namely, he will spell it out for us. You don't have to turn the page. No. According to that's the Pirush, the first one, after he brings the philosophers, he brings it first. That really what causes the male birth, it's the male. So what is her role is just to receive it. Yilogava, the upper dominates. That's what Mishtalsha, that explanation is a result, or reflects, or devolves Mayamaila from pointing out the virtue, extolling the virtue. When the awakening comes from above, comes from a lofty place. The focus is on who? The Ish. That is the philosophers. And the second Pirush, that no, it's really her that brings the Zohar. That's a reflection of the second perception, the second view, and that is that the virtue of Dafkik starting from below. Therefore, maybe the Alter brings Gamma Pirush, Itaka brings the Pirush. He brings the Pirush of the philosophers, that it's really his doing that produces the male child. Even though Shebegashmiyas, he concludes, it's not that way Begashmiyas, it's not like the conclusion that it's really her. But why does he bring it? Because we have to know, is to hint, there is a maila in the avodah which is purely granted from above. We have to know that maila. Because in the end, it's always going to be a fusion of both. Now let's see our order number 4. Yeah, order number 4. The question. So the Alter Rebbe said, the Rebbe said in the Maimer, why does he bring the Pirush of the philosophers, that it's the Maila of the father, and she just simply being there first means that he will have the dominant role, the upper role. So l'chayda, before he went this whole explanation of the two ways of connection, maybe a Pirush addition. Why does he bring the first Pirush? The Mishnah says in Eidius, when there's machlekes atanoim, and the conclusion is in the end, always of course, like the Rabbim, then why even bring that first opinion? It's not relevant. Okay, because there's many answers. But the answer the Mishnah itself gives is kedei levatlam. So someone, what does it mean? Someone comes along later and says, I received a tradition. It all comes back from Sinai, such and such. So you should know, yeah, we know about it, but it's true, and it was dealt with, and the majority said no, and therefore the halacha is not that way. Otherwise, it would upset the whole apple cart. Here's a new opinion, he received, it's legitimate, and therefore the whole halacha is called into question. So why bring the singular opinion? It's to negate it. So also the Alter Rebbe is bringing the opinion of the philosophers to dismiss it. You might want to say that. This is before the Rebbe's explanation, right? Just as a first explanation. Aval noisif alazesh, but Dush Chassidus first of all, in addition to the fact that in the Maimarim of Chassidus, Pnimius HaTorah, Ein Zer Rogel Klal. Pnimius HaTorah doesn't deal with yesterday's story. If you heard it, listen to this. You should listen to it. It's a beautiful story, unbelievable story. Chassidus doesn't deal with refuting secular philosophy. That's number one. Harei, beside from that, the kudas achilik shnei pirushim hu. What's the kud of the difference between these two pirushim? In addition to that, this is not the way of Chassidus. In addition to that, the Pirush philosophy in Yonush Shel Arishin, what are the philosophers saying? Her role, the first one, is it's only simply to give the one that comes afterwards greater force because it's going to be the one that comes right on top. Well, the Pirush Admo Zaken, the Alter Rebbe's Pirush is Hamaylu Barishin Atzma. You know, it's the first one that has the virtue. The Nimtza, so it comes out by understanding the philosophers. In this Maimer itself, Shemasike Pirush Hasheni concludes like it's the second one, that the true Mayl is Barishin Atzma in her, not in him. Muchach, we must conclude Shakavana Bazeh maybe Pirush addition. Why does he bring the first one? Pirush a philosophy. Well, like Chdei Levatloi, not to dismiss it. Ulachazek Pirush Shel Acharav, and just legitimize stronger the second Pirush. El Mitzada Inyan Va'ilusha Pirush Za'atzmai. It contributes to explaining our second explanation. They want to, because by first bringing out that they say it's the upper one that's dominant, that makes us appreciate that it's the lower one that's dominant. If he wouldn't bring it, he wouldn't have lower and upper. We just say the Isha as opposed to the Ish. It's they that bring out this first and second, lower and higher. And that's critical to the Alter Rebbe's explanation. He wants to, then he goes on to bring out what's I mean, Baruchnius, the Mali Bazrusa de Latat. You following that? Just say it again. If he wouldn't bring the Pirush philosophy that he brings is an introduction, not just to mevatel and to say they're wrong. On the contrary, first of all, he legitimizes it, but it contributes to our understanding because they give us the language. They say, what's the Maila of Isha Mazas Tchila? Because he comes second and he's the Elyon. And we say, no, it's the Tachten. Oh, this is the key to understanding the Inyan Beruchnius. That's why he brings it. It makes us understand the Ruchnius Dike Inyanim here, the two views of the mile of each one of these relationships, whether it comes from above to below or below to above. Clear?
That was saying it's it seems that the way you're teaching it still a means to an end to understand something else, where he seems seems to say that there's a mile in
there's a mile
on its own.
There's a mile on it. Okay. You're just adding this point. It's a mile on its own, which contributes to and makes us understand the mile of, in other words, we wouldn't understand the second mile if there's not a first mile in the first. It's the fact. The mile of, as we see, there's a mile in there in what the philosophers are saying. The Elyon is goiver. There's a mile to that, and that makes us appreciate even greater the mile when the Tata is goiver, when the lower one has the ultimate role. He wants to bring the ilu in this pirush, which is for what? To bring out the mile in the second pirush. Otherwise, there's no mile in the second pirush. The mile is in contrast to something else. Okay.